you want to be an author, but do you have what it takes?
This video is part of our series of novel writing tips, the author's journey from conception to publication.
What makes our writing tips videos different to all the others out there?
We're entertaining!
At least I hope so. And this is my story. I've taken the journey from novice writer to editor and publisher. And so I'm going to share with you not only what I've learned, but also all the little tips that I can give you to save you time, money and hassle. And I'm even going to share the mistakes that I've made so you can avoid them.
Whether you're a new author or one with a few novels under your belt, here you'll find tips on how to improve your writing and to help you avoid the pitfalls of the author's journey. So first of all, what qualities do you think a person needs to become an author?
I think they need to love books, really love books, and to read a lot. I also think they need to have inspiration and a good imagination. They have to have staying power. They have to be able to stay the course, and I think they need to be really willing to learn.
So what would you say to someone who wanted to write a book but maybe hadn't written in any huge capacity properly, professionally, since maybe school or whatever? What would you say to someone like that? Do they need to learn everything before they can start?
Well, you can. I mean, some people doing a course is a good thing to do because then they feel confident that they can write and maybe they'll get ideas from doing the writing course. For other people, like me, the inspiration comes and they find that they just have to write because they're so inspired, and then they learn as they go along. The trouble with coming up with the inspiration and doing it that way is that you don't know what you need to learn. So if you don't work with professionals, then, and you self-publish, you might publish something that's really subpar because you never learned what you actually need to learn.
You don't know what you don't know until you know it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So a lot of learning. One way or another, you've either got to do a course at some point, or you need someone who can tell you what you need to know and what you need to learn. And if you do like an appraisal from a professional editor, you should get that feedback at that point. Someone who writes appraisals should say, look, you need to learn about this and you need to learn about that and you need to, that sort of thing.
Right. So you don't need to have a high level of skill in writing before you start, as long as you're willing to learn during the process, and mentoring and learning from people who really know what they're doing is important.
Yeah, but I think you need to have a commitment to writing well, because that will drive you to be open to learning. And honestly, there's like so much advice out there on the internet, and if you find a blog of somebody, an editor or an author who's writing a lot about writing craft, then you can probably find, if you ferret through, or they might have written a book which goes through step by step. So you can learn a lot without actually having to do a course. The only thing is, if you don't do a course, you might miss bits. But as I say, you go to a professional, they'll tell you what you don't know that you need to know.
Indeed. So does that mean that anyone can learn to be a good writer?
Anyone can write a book, but not everyone can write a good book. Education's going to help, but you've got to be able to meld what you learn in terms of the craft with your imagination.
So how did you learn what you know?
Well, I started as an author with a lot of inspiration and a good idea, but because I read a lot, I was very aware of the fact that what I had written was just no way was it up to standard. So I knew that I needed to learn a great deal, but I didn't know what I needed to know. But I learnt that as I went along because I knew that I needed to know stuff. So I learned about writing from books, from workshops, short courses, from reading the blog of another author who wrote really good blogs about writing. And also my agent, when I got an agent, which was awesome, and I was very, very excited, but she said to me, well, you have to cut 18,000 words from this manuscript, and that sent me back to the drawing board. And I said, what, you want me to cut some of the story? And she said, no, you just, tighten it up. And I said, how do I do that? And she said, well, you'll figure it out. And it was like,
She was an agent, not a mentor.
That's right, and not an editor. But that was when I really got into line editing, and I did a lot of reading. And I also, at that time, I actually found a mentor, an editing person who, one of the top editors in Australia, and I did some workshops with her, and she was just fabulous. And I looked at my manuscript, which I thought was ready, and I went, oh my God, I have to rewrite the whole thing. So I just learnt so much from this lady that I was then able to sort of go right back in and rewrite, and not only cut all those words, but make the prose so much better. And
so
I loved it.
So this was basically your first introduction to line editing?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was line editing my own work. And it was because the agent told me to cut words that I had to go back and look at it again. So yeah, I just discovered I really liked that process, because it was like I had the raw material there, and now I was just making it into something really, really good. And I watched
like the
it.
final polish.
I watched it come alive. It turned from telling into showing in a way that I just never done before. And that all just came from my desire to write really well. It had to be as good as Cassandra Clare, who I was reading wildly at the time. It had to be as good as the top fantasy writers, because that was just me. I started to write reviews, and I learnt a lot from writing reviews, and I also learnt that a lot of books need line editing. Self-published books in particular, they miss that bit, and so the quality of the prose was lacking. And that was when I started to sort of get the itch to help other people improve their books. And then people would ask me if I would do manuscript appraisals for them. People would say, oh, your feedback's really great. Will you edit for me? Then I did a course, and then I started line editing. And I discovered I just love helping other authors to turn their ordinary prose into beautiful prose. And as for the publishing side of things, well, my agent never managed to actually get me a mainstream publishing deal. We were that close. I had a local publisher who was just like, the editor was really keen on it, but their marketing department just said, no.
It's right around the time that vampires and werewolves were trending, and your book doesn't have vampires and werewolves in it.
Yeah.
That's the problem. It was really just a marketing thing.
Yeah, it was sort of crazy things like the main thing was I've got demons in this. And at the time, the only demons that were in books that were selling and that mainstream publishers were publishing were Christian demons, and they had angels to go with them. And so
this is not a Christian book.
It's not. No, it's not that kind of demon at all. The demons are more like negative emotions. So the mainstream publishers sort of look at it and go, oh no, we've got enough demon books at the moment. Their marketing department just said, no, we can't handle another fantasy book this year.
It really, these decisions just so often come down to marketing and what's trending at the time.
That's right, yeah. And they wouldn't put it off till next year. It was just no, we don't have space for another fantasy book. We can't handle the marketing of another fantasy book this year. So, sorry.
That's why mainstream publishing sucks.
Yeah, so it was really hard. So then I had to either self-publish or put it in my bottom drawer. And you know what my agent said?
What?
Don't self-publish.
Oh.
But that was back in 2012, and it was still...
times have changed a bit since then. It's a lot more common to self-publish.
And it was very, very new. And the thing is, I just went, well, this is beginning. It was starting to happen. People were self-publishing and getting these, big sales and stuff. And I went, well, I've got to try it. I mean, I spent... 3-4 years on this series, a whole series, 4 books. I don't just want to put it back in the bottom drawer, I wanted to try it, wanted to give it a go. So I then learned how to self-publish, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I learned a lot along the way. And eventually, one of my editing clients said, where do I go for a publisher? What do I do? And I went, I could publish some of these manuscripts, because I had some...
I know how to do it. I may as well help them out.
And the thing was, I knew that there was a lot of sharks out there, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
dodgy companies or people just charging stupid prices. For,
Yeah, and then not doing, a proper proofread or whatever. And
not actually getting it to the quality that it should be.
yeah, well, I mean, I'd worked with these authors to make their manuscripts, make their books really good, and great product, and then I sort of gave it to them, and they go, well, okay, now what about?
do I do with it
what
now?
what about publishing? And I just looked at these people and I went, oh gosh, they're gonna. I remembered what I did, going out and looking at all the publishers, and
it's overwhelming. There's so many options.
Yeah. And so I just said, well, look, I could do it for you.
And that's where it all started.
That's where it all. So that's my learning story.
So, with all that in mind, what advice do you have for people who are starting to write a book or want to write a book?
I think at some point they have to really know that they've got to work with a professional, because it's the only way that they will learn what they don't know and they need to know.
You don't know what you don't know until you know,
Yeah. So I think that's really important. And the other thing I always say is, if people say just one thing, I say, do not be in a rush to publish. Because had I published that first book in the standard that it was before my agent said, go cut 18,000 words, it would not have been nearly as good as what it is now. So if I'd been in a real hurry, that whole going through and turning it into something,
the final polish.
Yeah, the final polish wouldn't have been done. And I see that a lot in self-published books, that you'll start reading, you get to a point, you go, no, this needs more work. The person has published before the book is ready. So don't be in a hurry to publish.
Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
All great things take time.
Yeah.
And effort. And inspiration. Most importantly, if you've got the inspiration, the drive to do it.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah, and keep the inspiration alive. So if you've got inspiration and a desire to write well and learn, you should be fine.
You're good to go.
Yeah, and I'm here to help.
I have a cat now. We hope you enjoyed this video. We will be making a whole series of these, taking the author journey from the conception of the idea all the way through to publication. So if you want to follow along on that, please, hit that subscribe button, the bell, like it, share it. We've got other videos previously published on our channel.
So check them out.
All the things.
Bye. We'll catch you next time.